I don't know which joke to start with first because we have so many in jokes. But first, obviously, I want to thank you all for being here. It is so sweet to look out and see both faces that I know and faces that I don't know. So thank you all. Some people have come from very far away, and some people have been at Asheville, Raven, and Crone and then come over from here. So thank you all. Thank you all. What I plan to do tonight is to read a few passages from the book. Some of you may know that late at night for the past couple of weeks, I've been doing a Facebook Live called Night Night. And I will read a little section from the book. So you can go back onto my Facebook page and hear the Night Night stories. I don't know that I will continue them now that we've launched the book because it was all about getting the book going, but I may very well do that. So thanks to everybody at Malaprop. These two women here are extraordinary. There are an extraordinary bastion of people. I don't know Brian, but I'm guessing he's pretty damned extraordinary, isn't he? Yeah. So we're just going to say that too. And his river gone? They're all really good. I'm saying all that because I know right now somewhere in Europe, Emeka is watching this. And she is like, Byron, I'm seeing, so be a grown-up for 5 minutes. So I thank all of you, and I thank all of you who are sitting at home in your comfy chair. You're drinking wine, aren't you? Come on. No, I know you're having herbal tea because you're always like that. So good you're here, good we're all here. And we are celebrating this book coming out. So I'm going to tell you the genesis. Pardon me, I won't preach on that subject. I'm going to tell you the genesis of this book, which is pretty weird. I've been teaching a class which premiered at Asheville, Raven, and Crone called Simple Practical Magic. And I've been teaching that class because there are so many people new to this field who think they can simply read a stack of books and then they will know what to do. They don't get any real training in the use of energy. They just think all they have to do is have a nice stick and to speak some garbled Latin, and then the whole world is going to change for them. And I kept running into these people again and again. Good-hearted people, often young, who just want to be a witch, but the only reference they have is the movie Practical Magic, or for the youngers, it's all that stuff that happens on TikTok. I'm going to look at all of you now when I say TikTok. So I'm someone who always defends the TikTok witches, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when we were that age, and don't deny it, and you don't deny it, all you people that I know, all you people with gray hair who are witches, don't deny this. When you were that age, when you were TikTok age, at 5 minutes to midnight, you were pulling out the Ouija board, and you were getting your mama's card table, and you're going to the darkest part of the house, and you were lighting the good Christmas candles, and you were going to call up the spirit of Davy Jones or Mary or whoever the hell it was. The only difference between the TikTok generation and us is that they have 10 million viewers, and it is recorded, and in 20 years, when they're our age, people are going to throw that back up. Remember that time you hexed the moon? Remember that? Damn, you were dumber than a rock. So we don't have that, though now I have outed all of you as someone who did that. Because don't lie to me. I know you did. So the book began because I was teaching the class. And it's a class on some of the things I'll read about tonight. Because there was an argument on social media. Imagine such a thing. Take a moment. And in it, a bunch of people who did not know what they were talking about were arguing as though they did. And I came into that conversation and I said, God, do I just need to write a book based on my simple practical magic class? And several people in the conversation said, oh, that would be really good. The important person, though, was my editor at Llewellyn, who contacted me about 6 hours later and said, how soon can you get us that manuscript? So that's why we have small magics. It's not simple practical magic, as you'll note, because the author, in most cases, doesn't have any control at all over what the title of the book is, as I did not. So that's how it all got started, and I'm going to read you some pieces of it. And look, I have little flags, so I don't have to go through the book and go, oh, how's this part? Is that pretty good? Do I use any salty language there? No, not quite. I will get to that. And if I don't, you should say, David Sedaris. And I'll know. I want to read you the dedication first because it made some of my friends cry. So I'm gonna be watching it. And no, there's some napkins up there if you need them. Dedication. And the dedication is the last part of the book that I write. I write everything else and then I decide about that. There are women, past and present, who practice the most profound and authentic magic, but cannot, for myriad reasons, call themselves witch. They are following the work of previous generations as they tend to and reweave their communities with all the skills they own. We owe them more than we can ever repay. This book is for them. We stand together, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, and calf to wheel. This book is an introduction to the ways of magic as practiced by a folk magician and an experienced witch. That's me. I will share the basics and explain some definitions that maybe we can agree on. What is magic? Why do it? How do you do it? Can anyone do it? The book includes those building blocks of magical practice and details techniques for grounding, relaxation, breathing, and accessing available energy. Protocols for shielding and warding are presented with an admonition on the importance of practice. This is not a spiritual book, though there is some discussion of engaging non-corporeal beings, including ancestors, as allies in the work. Learning the mechanics of this kind of energy work is often a case of cobbling together things we've read, experiences we've had, and stories we've heard. There is little hands-on training available to many people, and this book on the basics of magical practice from the experience of a seasoned witch may be helpful. Let me be very clear. Let me be very clear on this point. This is not the only way to practice magic, and these are not the only techniques. This is how I do it. And my hope is that you will test drive the practicum parts and see if they work for you, that you will tweak them if they aren't right, and go on to create your own techniques. Ultimately, I want you to have the experience and the courage to teach what you know and start the whole process again with the next generation, whatever their age, of magic workers. So that is my fondest wish, is that anything that I write and any teaching that I do at festivals and conferences, that it empowers and encourages people to learn how to do this and to practice it. I wrote a book in 2018 called Earthworks, Ceremonies in Tower Time. And I believe at this point in time, with so many systems collapsing, that you being able to access the energy that we call magic to make your life and your community better is a very important thing. So if you are a magic worker of any kind, I encourage you to do it often and to do it well and to become adept. So that, yes, we want you to buy all the new books on magic, all of them, all of them, all of them. but I don't want you to need them. I want you to be good at it because you practice it. This section is from chapter 4, Natural Born. And it's about something, as we are discussing humility, I was discussing social media. This is a section on humility. Social media reminds us to check our egos, even though every social media platform is a theater of ego, costumed and shouting. Never mind those forums. We are here to learn some old ways and to adapt them to modern lives in ways that make sense. There is an understanding in my Appalachian culture that the power and authority for all these practices is a gift, one that flows through and is shaped by the practitioner. This is often expressed as a humility about the work that is often missing in modern magical culture. Perhaps it is the difference between high magic and low magic. High magic as a ceremonial style of working, and low magic as the work of hedge witches and root folks. But I have noticed in my years of being a public witch that there are plenty of people who will brag about how talented or powerful they are without showing any real signs of either thing. Social media feeds are filled with inexperienced people who have developed strong brands, but not strong techniques. We don't need to do that. We don't need to prove anything by prancing around exclaiming our never fail witchery. There's a big difference between being confident and being arrogant. Arrogance is never required, and your skill level will speak for itself. Now I have to tell you a little story. Once upon a time, long ago, I wanted to write an article for a book called Women's Voices in Magic. And I wanted to talk about the work of Spanish-speaking people who were coming into the area, who were practicing curanderas. And I want to compare that to the native folkloric magic of Appalachia, of this part of Appalachia. So this book was asking for articles, and I said, I'd like to do an article about the comparative folk magics of these two traditions. And the editor said, oh, that would be lovely. We don't have anything on low magic. And I said, low magic, you mean the kind of magic that works magic? Low magic? But Jason Miller, who is a friend of ours and is a wonderful teacher, I think he says it best, and in a way that is not quite so insulting. He refers to it as the difference between temple magic, that would be high magic, and field magic. For years, I referred to it as MacGyver magic. So that's the kind of stuff I do. That if you say to me, I got this real problem, I'm going to reach in my pockets, if I have pockets, and I'm going to pull out a paper clip and a wad of hair, and I'm going to spit in my hand, I'm going to mash it all together, and that's going to work for you. So that really works better for me, the idea of temple magic, which is very ceremonial and lovely, where you would wear a necklace like this, and perhaps a nice robe like this, and you would have special candles and incense, and that's not the kind of magic I really do at all. I am going to tell that story, don't worry. I'll get to it, I promise. This is chapter 9, Living as a Witch. And it's a tiny section that I hope you will enjoy about cultural appropriation. And the story I will tell you after that, if I remember, is about the word gypsy. And look, everybody shivers like. Cultural appropriation is an issue writ large in the pagan and pagan-affiliated spiritual communities, with pros and cons on every position. In my Appalachian writing, I refer to this as cultural strip mining, the act of removing valuable and desirable pieces of a particular culture while having little respect and even contempt for the original practitioners, and returning nothing to the culture that is left depleted by our actions. Approaching spiritual technologies that are not native to you is a matter of serious consideration. It is also a question for your personal ethics. Learning from a practitioner steeped in the ways of their own culture, and then practicing with the permission of that teacher and the implied permission of the cultural group may be completely different from learning from someone who is not from a specific culture and learning the technology from a source not embedded in the culture. But you may choose to observe such teachings with curiosity and never practice them personally. Educating ourselves on the cultures that are adjacent to our own helps us better understand people and groups that are not our own, easing the way to better communication as well as better cooperation. I was at a festival, 2 months ago, I guess. And there had been a concert the night before by a group that has the word gypsy in the name of their group. And gypsy is a real hot button issue right now in many communities. So one of the people in the band, I saw him out and about, and I said, that was a great set last night. I really loved it. And he said, hey, yeah, thanks. Did you do some gypsy dancing to the gypsy music? And I was like, and then he explained to me that he was in fact a gypsy and he self-identified that way. And he gave me his cred, you know, here's my ancestor and this is where we come from. And so it gave me pause, as it often does when I talk about those words that when used within a culture are okay in the culture, but when used outside the culture are not okay. And the one I talk about the most, of course, is the word hillbilly, because I don't allow anyone to use that word around me that is not part of the culture, because I know what people mean when they use that word. And they don't mean someone who is good at growing corn or knows how to can tomatoes without giving you diseases or remembers what their great-great-grandmother's name was. I know what people outside the culture mean when they use that word. So it was interesting for me to meet a man who self-identified as a gypsy. And even though I myself would never say my gypsy friend, I know that it's okay for him. And he said it all in a way that was loving and fun and just informative in a really comfortable way. So I give you that as the story about cultural appropriation. Yeah, that was good. It was fun. And I did do some kind of waggly dance, and I don't think I'd call it with the G word, but I certainly enjoyed it. There's a section in this book about why it is people are afraid to do magic. Now, some of that is because they've seen all the movies, the shows, the whatever. They've been on the YouTubes. They watch the ghost hunting shows. They do all of that. And they're absolutely sure if they say the wrong word, it's going to be like that funny meme in social media where it's got somebody in a wizard hat and he's got written down the spell that he just did. And it how to summon a, but the swirly part here doesn't look like a D, it looks like an L, and there's a lemon sitting here. You don't ever need to summon a lemon. You can just get one. And frankly, I don't know why anybody would want to summon a demon. What are you going to do with it? Several years back, a friend of mine was very, very confident on social media. And she had created 5 rhymed couplets. And in those couplets was the whatever intentional words she needed. Fern, if you're watching, this is you. That we're going to call whatever being she was going to call. And I just was like, really? Is it, you think a spirit would come with a bunch of rhyme couplets? I mean, you ain't Shakespeare, kid. And she said, as Fern is wont to do, she said, well, how would you do it? And I said, well, I read about the culture that this being comes from. I'd find out everything I could about them, and I'd find out what they like to eat. And then I would just set that out. And then I'd hang out and wait. And if they showed up, that'd be great. But what's the point in conjuring a demon? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to let it run for Congress? Are you going to let it run for president? I saw that look. She got very excited. Was like, huh, how do you know they hadn't already been done? Just saying. So there's a whole section in here about the things that might make you hesitate to practice magic. When I've said to you over and over, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. So I looked at some of those things. I talk about the monkey's paw. You all have read that old story, haven't you? Be careful what you wish for. You be careful what you wish for, because you don't know what could happen. You could get a lemon, and then what are you going to do? So one of the reasons we hesitate to practice this technology is that we're trying to keep ourselves safe from the crazies. And I am laughing about this, but right now in this country, there are shops that are being picketed. There are shop owners that are being harassed who own pagan and pagan affiliated metaphysical stores. And we are looking again at the kind of satanic panic that we lived through. Some of us lived through in the 90s. So I won't laugh too much about that, but I will tell you, do more magic, do more magic, do more magic. So keep us safe from the crazies. As long as the general public continues to believe that witches and magic workers are soft-headed and delusional, but basically harmless, we are safer in a world where anything out of the societal norm is suspect and potentially dangerous. But being more mainstream, as witchery is now, is no real shield either. It is so easy to fall out of favor, both in the social media world and in your own neighborhood. Being an open, practicing witch is not and has never been a safe way of life. No matter how much we soften the image or sugarcoat the practice, the word itself is a trigger for many people. I don't say this to discourage you or make you feel fearful, but to remind you of the world we inhabit. You can choose to be completely private in your practice, or to wear the stereotypical witch clothes you want to the grocery store, or anything in between. If this is the work you are called to do, you will find a way that works best for you and your family. But as I often say when I'm at festivals, it is not necessary for you to wear a long black cloak and a pentacle the size of a salad plate in your everyday life so that people will know what you are. You can just go about your business and be kind and loving and sweet and however you want to be, and that will be perfectly fine. And I wasn't going to read this, but I think I am. Years ago, a friend brought his little son to the bookstore where I worked, which was not there. The boy was about 4 years old, and he had seen a billboard near his house that featured a green-faced, warty, pointy hat-wearing witch. The image terrified the boy, and his dad explained that the picture wasn't a real witch, it was only a Halloween one. The boy wasn't hearing it and was re-triggered every time they drove down that stretch of street, Merriman Avenue, finally putting his stuffed toy over his face so he couldn't see the mean witch. My friend brought him to me at the bookshop because the boy had known me from an early age and also knew I was a witch. It was sad to see this tough little guy so scared, but he let me take his hand and we walked back to the Jolly Children section and set up camp in the reader's gazebo. At first, I listened to his description of the mean witch, an image that loomed large in his imagination. And then he said, "You're a witch." "Yes, I am." I put out both hands and he gingerly touched them, looking for a sign that everything would be okay. He patted my palm with both of his small hands. I can still feel it. He was like, he's such a cutie. He's probably driving now. He patted my palm with both of his small hands. I talked to him about picking herbs and petting cats. And he reminded me that his cat liked me and sat on my lap. Finally, he crawled out of the little space and he went to the Halloween display where he gathered a pile of books. He brought them to me and we read the scary witch ones first, and then he climbed into my lap for the rest of the stack. He was lucky because he knew an actual witch, and his dad suspected that spending time in one of his favorite places with someone kind would help relieve his anxiety. But not everyone has a witch friend to visit, and this image looms large in our collective consciousness. And here we are in September, and it is in fact the season of the witch, coming soon. I'm gonna check my time. I do have to tell that story though. She's looking at me like, yeah, I'm gonna tell that story. I am. I'm gonna go to here. And this is still in that same section, how we are harmed. The lessons are clear to us down to the current time. The untamed and powerful, even within ourselves, must be subdued and punished. Friendly and domestic is much preferred and is much less is in much less personal danger from the community at large. We internalize this even now when we limit our use of power to the soft and domestic arts. Those arts have great value, of course, no argument here, but they are not the only kind of workings that require our magic and our good attention. These stories and so many others illustrate the dangers inherent in the scary old woman with special powers. Imagine how different the world's cultures would be if that solitary magic worker was not a warning to behave in all the ways that society demands, or else face the devastating magic of the witch. Imagine if she were a healer who held the secrets of the natural world, a beloved and important member of her community, a person who is helpful and clever and maybe a little odd. There may seem to be many different areas to consider as we develop a personal practice. We walk in a world where authenticity is highly valued, but not easily discovered. Creating a helpful and personally enriching practice will require discernment as we wade through the morass of folk tales and popular culture depictions of this creature we call a witch. Ethics, image, history, and practice are key elements of being a successful magic worker. You can take those elements one at a time to avoid being overwhelmed, except for the practice, which we should do as often as possible in order to be good at this esoteric work we've chosen for ourselves. We live in a time now when claiming a witch aesthetic is very cool. Smoky eyes, bone necklaces, collections of crystals and candles. Does that make them witches? Can you be a witch without practicing witchcraft, without doing magic? My answer is no, absolutely not. There's also a section at the end of every chapter that's a practicum. So we talk about techniques. And then at the end, it says, now you try it. So I hope that some of you will do that. Okay, I'm going to tell the story now. She's not even paying attention. You got here, yay! They came from far away, not as far as you did, but far away. So I was in here signing books, and Malaprops, thank you, does this wonderful thing that I can encourage people to order my book at Malaprops, from Malaprops, and then that way they get a signed book. And so people order from all over the country, and I come in to a big stack of books and I just sit and sign them all. And we did this, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Had a wonderful time because the staff here is marvelous. And it lets me feel like a bookseller again because I'm back in the bookstore doing work. So a friend of mine from high school, calling you out, Mark West, came in. He was shopping. He didn't realize I was here. And he told me the story of some writer. He said, I think you should sign the book the way this guy did. And he would sign, go back to your home on Horror Island. And he signed that in every book and then signed his name. Go back to your home on Horror Island. And I went, I'm totally going to do this. So one of you tonight, when I sign a book, it's you, dear. But he couldn't remember which writer had done that. So both of us, as it turned out, we had to find that out. So it's from Ron Burgundy, the weatherman. It's from that movie. He evidently says that when he thinks the mic is off. But the person who signed the books apparently was David Sedaris. And if you know David, you can just imagine he was smiling like, and how do you spell that again? Is that Cynthia with a Y? Go back to your home on Horror Island. David Sedaris. So yes, that was hilarious. Of late, and this is going to be the last thing I read, and then we'll talk if you have questions. Of late, when I've been teaching and when I read tarot, some of you know I read tarot at Asheville, Raven, and Crone on Tuesdays when I'm in town. I see so many people who want to do something desperately, but they just can't bring themselves to do it. And so I have been writing them permission slips. So if I'm reading your cards, as I have done actually, and you're like, I don't know that I can bring myself to really do that. I'll write you a permission slip and slide it across the table for you. So here, the conclusion of the book is a permission slip you don't need. One day a week when I'm in town, I read tarot at our local metaphysical shop, Asheville, Raven, and Crone. There's a pretty and private reading room with a long table. And when I arrive, someone on staff hands me a schedule for the day. Sometimes it's back-to-back readings for 4 hours. Sometimes there's only one reading scheduled at the very end of the day. I take them as they come and I read as best I can. I've been reading cards for over half a century. No. And began with playing cards, though now I use a tarot deck. As I've matured in my practice, I found that much of what I do is a sort of counseling, advising people on the best things to do or the best way to be, given what the cards are indicating about the time in which they walk. More and more people are floundering in these challenging times. They literally don't know what to do next. The world feels so different, so frightening, as if there is nothing that feels secure, nothing that can be trusted to be as it was even a few minutes ago. When I ask them what their fervent desire is at that moment, they are often puzzled at the question because the life they lead doesn't allow for the frivolity of dreaming about what you want. They've been instructed through their personal histories and through family and church to limit the possibilities and get on with the work of life. Many people have been trained to not even question the way the world is, but to accept it as the will of higher powers or as intractable situations over which they have no agency at all. Another personal malady that inflicts itself upon the modern world is the insecurity many of us hold about our value in society. The constant judgmental drumbeat of the dominant culture would have us believe that we only truly have value when we abide by societal norms of conduct and of dress. In addition to that, the lingering ghosts of our Puritan founders inflict on us the curse of busyness and tie our value into what we are able to produce and how hard we can work. Some of us feel that our sense of self-worth is directly tied to how much we get done in a day or a week or a lifetime. If we take time off for play or even for rest and healing, We know others will think less of us and judge us for our failure because we have been seduced into judging ourselves when we can't meet impossible standards for production. People do judge us. Social media is rife with it, and the overculture itself has come to a place where we are evaluated constantly and usually found wanting. The judgment is so heavy that it can seal us off from our creativity and dull our ears so that we don't hear all the good that is said because we are focused on the negative and the shaming that comes with that. When we hold ourselves against impossible standards in any area, we are bound to be wanting, to be less than perfect, and therefore unacceptable. How did we get to this terrible place? We may have inherited the notion of achieving perfection from our parents' example of all work and no play. We may have received it from the religious instructions of our childhood and youth, when we were raised in systems that hold us to the perfection of a deity. It is usually understood that we are forgiven by the faraway deity for our missteps and misdeeds, but our human co-religionists are not required to do so and will hold us up as an example of how not to be. The show trials of inquisitional Europe were designed to save souls at the expense of destroying bodies and to serve as a warning to anyone else who might be living in a state of non-conforming to community standards. It was and is a control mechanism to make sure the citizens know what is expected of them. Current standards are presented in the same way and require knowledge of what's au courant, whether in fashion or opinion. You have value simply by being. If you take nothing else away from this book on magical practice, I hope you will always remember that imposter syndrome may come to visit on occasion, but do not let it take up permanent residence in your soul or in your head. You do not have to calculate your value based on other people's expectations or by working so much that you never enjoy life. So, questions.
So
Yeah.
do you get imposter syndrome?
Yes, yeah,
That's
all the time.
sounds impossible. I don't believe you.
Okay. I don't know what to say about that. We'll talk about it later, maybe. Somebody over here? Yes,
I guess we can pick up our books we ordered tonight.
absolutely.
I love people who make me laugh.
Does that mean you love me?
I make people laugh. That's why they call me Downtown Joe. I'm a giver, not a taker.
Byron, I mean, how do you follow up with that? All right, so we'll take it away. Byron, a little bit about your writing process, please. What is it like?
I love to write. And as you all know, I travel a lot. So often I don't get to write as much as I want to. But I got myself in a situation this year where I was traveling a lot. I had some health issues at the beginning of the year. So the book that I just finished and turned in less than a week ago, the process was slightly different. But generally speaking, my process is I think about in general what I want the book to be about. And I mostly write nonfiction. I started writing as a playwright, which is sometimes fiction and sometimes nonfiction. But since then, I've only written nonfiction. I get an idea what I want the book to be, and then I start playing with words for the chapters. And then I generally go chapter by chapter, and I write the book from the beginning to the end. And if there are chunks that I'm like, I don't know what I want to say about that, then I will leave that chunk and I will write in all caps, more here. I generally write my books longhand in a notebook, and then I transfer them over into the computer.
Follow up to that, do you have the end of the book in mind?
No, never. And with this most recent book, Feral Church, that process was so different that I would go into a chapter and I would decide where the chapter was going to be. I was going to be on the prairie because it's a book of path working. I would be on the prairie and I would just go into the prairie and I would just write. I had no idea how it was going to end. I knew it was going to end in Avebury at Silbury Hill, but more than that, I didn't know.
Live audience, question?
Do you ever find that sometimes the chapters just sort of write themselves?
Yes.
And you just are the scribbler?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some things like this book was surprisingly easy to write because it's all about practice and it's something I do all the time. So the writing all of it out it was just a matter of writing it out. I didn't even have to think much about it because I was just writing out my process. So, yeah, but sometimes not that. I think that would be more likely though in fiction where the characters take the whole thing on. Yeah. So, because some of you are fiction writers, do you find that the character, looking at you, the characters kind of take off sometimes?
I've never had a chapter write itself, let's just.
And how about you when you're writing
It's
characters?
going good, yeah.
Yeah.
Just sit back and look.
And then he said, what?
There was a follow-up to process writing with regard to, do you have a favorite time and place?
My preference is first thing in the morning because I feel like I'm fresher then. But my schedule this year has been such that I just write whenever there's a block of time. And Joe has been wonderful. So I would give a shout out to the husband that he says, my wife wrote a book and I helped by staying out of the way. He really did. I would go in the dining room and just be like this, and he left me alone. Thanks. But those days are over now. You had a question.
I'm new to the area, and I was a writer in Salem, Massachusetts, for a paper there for a couple of years and covered the Wiccan scene.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit familiar with it from that angle.
Yeah.
And I'm also Italian, and I'm really interested in Italian folk magic and Southern Italian folk magic especially, and I know a little bit about that, but I'm wondering how Appalachian magic, which you practice, differs from Italian or
You know,
New England.
that is such a great question. And I want to say, yes, a lot of things are very different and a lot of things are the same because it's basically peasant magic. So the materials will be slightly different. I know that in the Strickleria you're talking about, it's like primarily Sicilian, that a lot of it has kind of a Catholic filter, but Appalachian folk magic has a Protestant filter. So they both are these magical practices that not only survive, but thrive in the midst of these strong religious traditions, which is fascinating. Yeah, and there's some, and I can't remember them right now, but there are a couple of brand new books on Strega within the past year, 18 months, that are really good. And they're by legitimate practitioners, not people pretending to be Strega.
Do you have a favorite Appalachian folk magic book that you would recommend?
Mine, all mine. There aren't a lot of people writing about this, so.
Yeah, you're my first
Yeah.
one that I know about. So.
I mean, there are other people, but I'm kind of it, yeah.
She's really quick too, so.
Yeah, the book before this one was my fourth book on Appalachian folk magic. And even though this is the practical secrets from Appalachian, it's not anything about Appalachian magic. It's just the branding they put on me. Now I'm the Appalachian Village Witch. Wait till you read the new book.
So how many books total have you written?
This book is number 7, and the one that went in is number 8. And my next book that I've begun sketching out is again nonfiction, but it's called The Ragged Wound, Tending the Soul of Appalachia. And it is my answer at last to hillbilly elegy.
Yes.
And I've been writing this book since that book came out. So I've been looking, if any of you have contacts with university presses, I've contacted a couple of university presses because Llewellyn won't publish that. Hmm?
Now you just need
And,
to run for Senate.
right, no, I want to run, let me just take this opportunity to say. I think that I am the perfect person to run for the Director of Soil and Water Conservation for the County of Buncombe.
Yes.
I'm a Buncombe County native. I drink water. I'm a gardener, so I like soil. So I think that's what it's gonna be. And I'll just work my way up. You know, by the time I'm 80, I could run for president. We're still recording this, aren't we?
Virtual question. Will you in the future demonstrate on a platform your breathing and exercises as you write about them in small magic?
Oh, that's somebody that's already read the book. Yes, in fact, if you would like me to do that, I'll figure out how to set up my phone or my computer or whatever, because they're a visual.
Yeah.
I wrote about them as best I could, but you really need to see people doing it. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Are you taking applications for adoption? We also drink water.
How are you with soil? No, but one of my dreams, and I hope to make that a reality, is I've got a small property in South Asheville, and I want to come off the road. I'm on the road all year long. I want to come off the road and have people come to me and come do weekend intensives and maybe week-long intensive and maybe month-long intensives where, you know, I feed you good soup and we work in the yard and we practice magic. So keep an eye out for that. I don't think my daughter would let me adopt you.
Virtual question.
Yes.
Do you think this book would be good for a wee little practitioner as well as someone practicing for 25 years?
I think I would ask, is wee little, does that really mean beginner? Because I think the language in it might be difficult for a child, but I certainly think a middle school age person who is a good reader would get it. I'm talking to you like a bookseller now, Ernie. So a strong reader in middle school and beyond is good. The whole point of this book is that it's really good if you don't have any idea what to do. It will give you some ideas. But if you are somebody who has been practicing, looking at you, Tina, been practicing for decades, what this does is give you an opportunity to re-access beginner's mind and to remember some of those things that maybe you used to do, but you don't do them anymore because it was a step you keep skipping. But if you went back and went through all the steps again, it might improve your practice. So when I've offered this class, I have had very experienced people take it and go, oh, that's a grounding technique. I didn't know. I'm going to try that. Because there are lots of techniques in the book, just as there are in the class. Because there is no one way to do this. There is no one way. So you have to try it. It's experiential. You have to try it and figure out what works for you. So yes and yes to that question.
This old witch read it from cover to cover and loved every page. So-
Thank you.
And said so.
And said so. Shall I read what you said? Here's the funny thing. I still am so feral about working with publishers because my first 4 books were with small independent presses. So I I did whatever I wanted to do, and my editor would slow me down and make sure there were plenty of Oxford commas. But I was used to treating it in a fairly cavalier way. So when my editor had forgotten that she needed endorsement, I needed to have endorsements for the book, she had forgotten about it. She sent me a note and said, you haven't gotten me any endorsements. And I said, you didn't tell me to do that. And she went, oh, well. And then I said, how many do you need? But by the time she got back to me, I had contacted 14 of the people that I love and respect the most. And I said, would you endorse my new book? And they all said, yes. So when she got back to me and said, oh, 5 or 6, I said, sorry, it's going to be about 14. So the first few pages of the book are people who love me and who I also love, saying, damn, what a fine book this is. Oh, very good. You've done good. Hi, Nancy.
Well, we're getting to the top of the hour. So is there a last question? And remember, you can of course talk to Byron.
Yes.
I'm not that familiar with your earlier work, so I just wonder if how this book relates. Is it-
My first 2
Where did you
books.
start?
Well, if you're really interested in Appalachian culture and folkways, go to the first 2 books, which are Staubs and Ditchwater and Asphodity and Madstones. Then I wrote a book called Embracing Willendorf, which is it's a book about loving your body and loving your body to health and fitness. Then the 4th book is Earthworks, and that's not available right now. It's on reorder, but it's not available. And that is about the times that we live in now, which I believe are tower times, and these huge top-down systems, hierarchical systems are collapsing. And if anybody wants to argue about that, I'd love to hear your argument. And that is all about, it's essays about where we are in the time we are, and then a book, and then the rest of it's ceremonies and rituals. Then I wrote a book called Roots, Branches, and Spirits, and that's Appalachian, but I would read the first 2 first. And then I wrote a book called Living a Pagan Life, and that's about the wheel of the year and how we tie into the cycle of seasons. And then this book. So if you're interested in the Appalachian stuff, go with the first 2. If you're interested in more aligning your life with the cycle of seasons, go for Seasons of a Life, whatever it's called. Again, I didn't title the book, so I keep forgetting what's called. I remember Roots, Branches, and Spirits, which in my head has a totally different title. I remember it by going Ruth Bader, Roots, Branches, Spirits. Thank you.
Any closing comments?
From me.
Yes.
Again, my gratitude to all of you, to Malaprops, to all of you, and my encouragement that if you are a magical practitioner, however you call yourself, you become adept at it. You practice it all the time. It's like Doritos. Use as much as you want, and there will be more. There's always more. So we were coming downtown today, and my husband is driving, and he said, where am I going to park? Where am I going to park? And I'm like, there'll be a place to park. So we parked up here. So there's a place to park. And then as we're coming down here, a place opened up across the street, and one opened up exactly in front of the bookstore. And that's the value of the parking spell, my friend. Thank you all.